Good morning, Droogs. How are you all doing today? Hope everybody's doing well. And we are here today to talk about a controversial topic. It's about JEET KUNE. Booyah! Right guys, so first and foremost, welcome back to the channel. And secondly, I will give a bit of a heads out first, saying that this topic we're going to be discussing could be quite controversial for some people. We are going to be discussing if JEET KUNE is a martial art, if JEET KUNE is actually a philosophy, or if JEET KUNE is actually a cult. So, with that being said, I can understand that some people might get a little bit upset. That's just part of life, you know, we can go through life expecting everything to go our way. So, serious debate on this and serious discussions. This isn't here to slate or slag certain traits and styles off. It's just something which has been in my mind for quite a long time actually, and I thought I'd actually make a video about it, and hopefully it will garner quite a bit of debate, of healthy debate. So with that being said, let's get into this, and we will look at first JEET KUNE as a martial art. Booyah! So, JEET KUNE as a martial art. Okay. Most people know JEET KUNE was created or originated from Bruce Lee in 1964 after he had an alleged fight with Jack Wong Man. Now, there are some controversies itself about this fight. Did it actually happen? And both the Lee camp and the Jack Wong Man camp claim different things happened in this fight. Whether or not that fight happened is irrespective of what we're discussing. However, JEET KUNE literally translates as the way of the intercepting fist. Prior to starting JEET KUNE, Bruce Lee was trained predominantly in Wing Chun under Ip Man. So he came from a very strong Chinese upbringing in terms of martial arts, and he eventually began to realize the flaws of traditional classical martial arts styles in terms of fighting principles. He came to realize that it'll be okay for one stylist to spar against somebody from the same style and use same principles, but the problems arose when you started using a stylist who did one art going against a stylist from another art, because they both use different principles, and what could be successful in one style isn't necessarily going to be successful against somebody of another style. And the thing is, with what Lee realised with traditional martial arts as well, a lot of them were too rigid, not adaptable for real street fighting encounters. They lacked the fluidity. Coming from a traditional martial arts background myself, I can vouch actually for that sort of concept of martial arts. In a traditional Taekwondo school that I went to, we'd spend a third of the class doing basics, we'd spend a third doing Pumsi, we'd spend a third doing actual sparring. So out of like a 2-hour class, we'd only spend 1/3 of that actually doing anything fighting related. So Bruce was able to pick up on that. So when he actually came around to actually create JEET KUNE, he took a lot of discarded a lot of the traditional aspects, which he perceived as being impractical, ineffective, unrealistic. I think would actually be the onus, really, the unrealism of traditional martial arts, and he replaced it very much more with modernity or with actual combative tried and tested formula from boxing. Boxing is a very ancient martial art in itself, but the overwhelming majority of boxing training, if not all, is actually focused on fighting. You learn footwork, you learn endurance, you learn actual fighting techniques which have been tried and tested. You're not learning theory, which a lot of traditional martial arts would teach, then they teach practice as a side-on. So that was the martial art concept of JEET KUNE. It had at its forefront, I'd say, a very strong emphasis on what is practical. Indeed, Bruce Lee himself actually said, you know, take forward what is useful and discard what is useless. So in terms of a martial art, JEET KUNE could be argued to be a martial art, because martial in its basic phrase means combat or fighting, and JEET KUNE having the onus on realism and practical aspects very much hit the martial on the head. It wasn't theory art. It was pretty much combat art. So thinking that fighting was the main element of this new art. So that is looking at Jeet Kune Do from a martial art perspective. Jeet Kune Do as well it's branched out into two different branches from what I understand. I'm sure there's a lot more, but it's two main different branches. And get different organizations. Jeet Kune Do actually has a formalized registered logo as well. I believe it actually has headquarters, I believe, in California. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I do believe they have an HQ of sorts. So it has almost in a way become what was meant to be free flow and open and fluid, has almost in a way become quite regimented in a traditional martial arts style with those concepts I've literally just mentioned into consideration. The fact it has an HQ, the fact it has a logo. I believe actually even the name Jeet Kune Do might even be registered itself. But again, I'm not 100% sure on that, so I'm not going to say that is gospel. Hopefully somebody could correct me or verify if that's correct. But in so doing, most people would actually look at Jeet Kune Do from that perspective and say, yes, it is a martial art. Or indeed, it's almost generally accepted that if somebody says, I practice martial arts, oh, what do you do? Well, I do Jeet Kune Do. Nobody's going to look at them and be like, oh no, it's not a martial art. They're going to be like, oh, okay, cool, whatever. So that's looking at Jeet Kune Do from a martial arts perspective. So now we're going to look at it from a philosophical perspective. Booyah! Okay, so from the philosophical perspective, now, when Jeet Kune Do came around from Bruce Lee, Bruce went to great lengths to actually say, look, I've not made another style. I don't want to basically replace old styles with this new style and basically create what he called a traditional mess. To Bruce Lee, Jeet Kune Do was more of an approach. It was more of a concept. It was more of a philosophy that you could apply to your own self. Indeed, if we're actually going to quote Bruce Lee now, Bruce Lee actually said, bear with me, this is reference from Wikipedia, by the way. I know it's not the best reference. Bruce Lee quote, I've not invented a new style, composite, modified or otherwise, that is set within distinct form as apart from this method or that method. He then goes on to say, on the contrary, I hope to free my followers from clinging to styles, patterns or molds. Remember that Jeet Kune Do is merely a name. End quote. So with that in mind, Bruce Lee was essentially saying, this is not a new style I've created, it's not a new art I've created. It is simply a framework or a skeleton, which you have to then start putting the flesh and the muscle and the sinew all over the skeleton itself to create something authentic, unique to yourself. Again, I can actually vouch for that because, as I said before in numerous videos, my upbringing has been traditional Taekwondo. And Taekwondo is very big on the kicks. Taekwondo doesn't emphasize much hand techniques. And when I started learning Taekwondo from a young age, I recognized from quite an early stage that actually it was a weakness not to use punches. When you get in close to somebody, use those punches, use the elbows, if permitting on the street or if competition allows it. Kicks, you can use kicks in close, but that's a different issue. But the main drawback of Taekwondo when I was learning was the fact it didn't emphasize much hands. So I began working on myself and thinking, okay, I'd still like to do Taekwondo, but I'll just use a lot more hand techniques, or I'd modify my Taekwondo, which enables me to use the hands a lot more. And some of my favorite techniques in Taekwondo now are actually hand-based techniques. So with that bearing in mind, I actually tailored that Taekwondo to myself. I made it person-centered. So one could reason that I actually used a Jeet Kune Do philosophy to adapt my own Taekwondo style. So that could actually be an example of that could be an example of Jeet Kune Do as a philosophy. And you could apply that to any art. You could apply it to, if you do Muay Thai, nobody will argue that Muay Thai is ineffective as a striking style. However, there is no groundwork in Muay Thai. So a practitioner of Muay Thai might do Muay Thai as the base style, but then they may actually say, okay, I'd like to learn maybe some ground grappling, some judo, jiu-jitsu, MMA, Brazilian jiu-jitsu. in order to complement my striking style. And again, you could then reason and say that Muay Thai fighter has actually adapted a Jeet Kune Do philosophy to his training. He's seeing the flaws in his base style, but instead of completely discrediting that style, which is otherwise a very, very strong style, he will take from other styles to fill in those gaps, to fill in those weaknesses. So therefore, he's using a Jeet Kune Do philosophy of taking what is useful and adding it to his style. That can be argued very much well as a philosophy. As I said, any style can do that. Any stylist can look at themselves and think, okay, where are the holes in my base style? Let's take from other arts. How do I fight mostly? Do I mostly go to a ground? Then I'd like to borrow from those ground arts. Am I doing weapons forms? Maybe I could take from weapon arts such as Kenjutsu, Kali, Eskrima, etc. Catch wrestling, if they're doing more grappling stuff, etc., etc. You know, so from that perspective, it can be argued that Jeet Kune Do is not actually a martial art in itself. It's actually a philosophy to complement martial arts. So next one we're going to go into is going to be the most controversial one of this discussion, the cult. Booyah! Right, so Jeet Kune Do as a cult. Now, martial arts have always attracted McDojos. Martial arts throughout the years have always attracted unscrupulous individuals who seek to exploit their students in various different ways, financial, emotional, psychological, physically, in order to fulfill their own personal endgame. Why am I using this cult with Jeet Kune Do specifically is because of the legend of Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee is idolized by martial arts across the world. He's idolized as a truly inspirational figure. I mean, a lot of people I've met say they've been influenced by Bruce Lee. That's how they got into martial arts, or they still use Bruce Lee's Jeet Kune Do philosophies and concepts in this day and age to help with their training. In itself, there's nothing wrong with that. We all get influences from different sources. You get influenced by different people in life. That's absolutely fine. I myself was never very influenced by Bruce Lee. I could appreciate he was an outstanding human being in terms of his physique. I believe he was very revolutionary for the time for martial arts and for general fitness. So for that, and he had an athletic ability which I have never been able to achieve and I never will be able to achieve. So I will give him respect in those areas because he deserves that respect in those areas. However, as an influence on my own martial development, I wouldn't say he's influenced me that much. Like I said, withstanding the Taekwondo concept I had earlier, that's probably about as far as I actually took my inspiration from him. That's just my personal story. However, because Bruce Lee is such an inspirational figure and everybody recognises him, he's the iconic stance with his pinkies out like that, the bouncing from foot to foot, the cat mating noises. Please excuse the cats behind me. They're going through psycho hour. So, because Bruce Lee was so inspirational and everybody recognises him as an icon in the movies, a lot of people are drawn to him. And a lot of Jeet Kune Do instructors who I know and I've had interaction with, sadly, have actually used that icon as marketing ploys to fill their own purses. I have met three people who have studied Jeet Kune Do as a martial art or go to Jeet Kune Do, exclusively Jeet Kune Do classes. One of them, I'm not going to mention names, but one of them claims to have killed a cow with a golf ball. Another one claims to have actually been the student of Guru Dan Inosanto. And another one is now morbidly obese. Basically, though, all these three people, they all claim that they're learning genuine Bruce Lee Jeet Kune Do to the point of guarding it religiously. One of these people I know, I trained with him for a little bit and he was doing some pad work and he was doing an incorrect technique. I corrected him on these incorrect techniques and he could not accept it. He kept saying stuff like, oh, this is the Bruce Lee method, Bruce Lee did this, Bruce Lee did that, I'm just doing what Bruce Lee did, therefore you, Sam, cannot correct me. That was his mentality. As well as that, you're getting a lot of instructors who are then physically abusing their students. I've actually seen footage on YouTube of one Jeet Kune Do instructor who plows power side kicks right into his students. He gets them to hold the pad incorrectly. He plows into them, sends the student flying, claims it's Bruce Lee sidekick. Playing around with nunchucks. And I don't know much about weaponry, but I do know enough about nunchucks to know that they're actually a method for building up muscle memory for high blocks. You've got your nunchuck here, you swing it up, you reach underneath to grab. Look, blocking hand underneath here. This hand you're using to swing is now pulled all the way up. You're guarding against a strike from the head. It's not to look flash. You're not swinging it over your arms like this just for the sake of it. And if you see somebody swing a nunchuck and it's actually quite low down here, you're actually not using a nunchuck effectively. It needs to be high to guard. That's what it's there for. So I saw this guy on YouTube who was using his nunchucks and he was actually hitting them into his his student's face, because he had a student wearing head guard and body armor, and it looked as though he was just using it as an opportunity to show off. So you get those people who physically abuse their students and then saying, oh, but this is the Bruce Lee method, this is what Bruce Lee did. Look at footage of Bruce Lee doing it, you'll see it's true, and we're just following this... How do I phrase this? We're following his legacy by basically doing this. And these instructors can actually dupe their students. And what's really sad is that a lot of these students are fully grown adults. You think they'd have a developed cognitive mind frame. You'd think they'd be able to smell BS and say, hey, wait a minute, I'm not paying you a lot of money. And a lot of these Jeet Kune Do schools that I know do charge an extortionate amount of money. So you get these students who pay a lot of money, come along simply to get physically abused. And then you get the psychological abuse as well, where these same instructors would say pretty much along the lines of, yes, we're continuing Bruce's legacy. You want to be part of Bruce's legacy, don't you? Yeah, you can be, you're like the 5th generation of a Bruce Lee student. Yeah, what we're teaching you now is genuinely Bruce Lee techniques. This is what Bruce Lee used to do. Using this sort of mind manipulation, these mind games, to abuse these students. Also, what I can say from a lot of these Jeet Kune Do people who I know, a lot of them have actually gone onto online forums. When I was doing research for this video, actually, I did go onto a few online forums, various different ones, Martial Arts Planet, Sherdog forums, bullshido.net, and even just typing into Google. And you find there are lots and lots of arguments in regards to Jeet Kune Do and Bruce Lee. And a lot of, the overwhelming majority of comments in favor of Jeet Kune Do were very acidic. They were very generally nasty comments, saying stuff like, why don't you come down and put your money where your mouth is, put your money where your mouth is if you don't like Jeet Kune Do, or, you know, oh, but we're doing Bruce Lee's method, you just do Tai Chi, it's useless, not even a martial art, ho ho ho, this kind of stuff. Indeed, actually, one of the Jeet Kune Do instructors who I know, when he first started doing Jeet Kune Do, I found this actually quite recently. It was like an archive of some online forum. He went onto a forum and was basically trash-talking karate, calling it all the names under the sun, saying it was useless, and you can imagine what kind of things he was saying. It was just not very nice things about other martial arts. But when somebody criticised Jeet Kune Do, he wouldn't have it. He was quick to jump on them and say, like, no, you're just naive, you're stupid, you're ignorant, you're arrogant, you don't know what you're talking about. So Jeet Kune Do as a cult seems to foster that sort of environment. And again, that's only from my experience, from what I've seen. I'm absolutely sure there's some people out there who practice Jeet Kune Do who have a very open mind. I'm sure there are some lovely people out there who do Jeet Kune Do. You get arrogance and narrow-mindedness in all martial arts. However, with the Jeet Kune Do, I think they use a lot of Bruce Lee as a means to validate their insecurities. Okay guys, so that brings us to the end of the video. and I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope it's given you guys something to kind of like consider and think about in regards to Jeet Kune Do, whether it's a martial art, whether it's a philosophy, or whether it's a cult. So I can only speak from my experiences. Maybe you guys out there have your own experiences of Jeet Kune Do. Maybe you've trained Jeet Kune Do. Maybe you've had a negative experience with Jeet Kune Do. Maybe you've had a positive experience with Jeet Kune Do. Maybe you've been able to adapt Jeet Kune Do concepts and philosophies to your current martial arts training. It would be interesting to hear what you guys have to say. So if you have any thoughts or experiences, please do leave those in the comments. I will get back to every single comment. Meantime, guys, all I can say is stay safe, train hard, keep listening to Eisbrecher because they're the best German heavy metal band around, and I'll see you all in the next video. Booyah!